this team had to pull closer together than really ever before. It's very easy in these circumstances, in these difficult times, to pull apart, and we didn't. Why was the car not as competitive as in Brazil? I think you've probably heard Toto refer to the table of doom. So this is something we constructed internally that allows us to somewhat predict where our car will be relative to certainly the fastest cars, track on track. And it worked fairly well. It's something that actually had fairly good correlation across the season. And it did say that in, for example, Mexico and Brazil, we would be significantly more competitive than we were going to be in Abu Dhabi. And it's a function of the properties that make our car both strong and weak. And that transpired to be true. And as perhaps negative as that comes across, that's a very good thing, because it means that the properties of our car that we understand, we actually have a good grasp on them, sufficiently so that they actually look to be real in real life, and then the reasons behind it look to be correlated. So that obviously doesn't answer the question as to why we weren't as competitive. Part of it is that I think Ferrari moved backwards across Mexico and Brazil. Hard to explain why, but they definitely weren't as competitive there as they were towards the end of the season in Abu Dhabi, and they were a fierce rival in Abu Dhabi. Very, very quick in a straight line and competitive overall with good tyre degradation. That doesn't obviously explain Red Bull and why we moved back to them, but I think that is explained in the properties of where our car is weak and where it's strong. And Brazil had a lot of cornering sequences, types of corner, speeds of corner that really suit the characteristics of our car, which unfortunately we didn't have in Abu Dhabi. The final one is Abu Dhabi is very, very cool conditions once we're really racing at night. And we saw a few properties on the tyre, a little bit of graining appearing on the front axle and on the rear axle, and that for sure hurt us in the race. Did Lewis's first lap incident with Sainz cause his retirement? Short answer, no. There was actually surprisingly little damage from that first lap's incident. The bib, the area under the car, did take a massive impact as a result of it, and that won't be good. The front wing end plate, again, had a knock, but generally speaking, it was fine aerodynamically. What happened at the end of the race is actually a loss of hydraulic pressure, and it had no relation or no bearing to that first lap incident. What impact did George's 5-second penalty have on his race, and did it make us switch to a two-stop? So I'll cover off the second of those two first. No, that wasn't the reason why we switched to the two-stop strategy. That was always a fundamental of tyre degradation and what the strategy for him would have played out to be the best overall. In terms of the impact of the 5-second penalty, the first thing is that Ferrari are now in a comfortable position because they know that we can't undercut Sainz, the second of their two cars. Because as soon as we come in the pit lane, we'll be stationary for 5 seconds. And it means we can't pressurize them into either forcing them onto a 2 or keeping them out on a 1, as an example of that, by undercutting them. What it did do with George is obviously it meant his race with Lewis was far more difficult. Both cars were very equally matched, and at the point where you have a 5-second penalty, you're clearly game over in terms of the grand scheme of racing each other. Why did we choose to go with the higher downforce wing in Abu Dhabi? It's a very fair observation to say that we weren't quick enough in a straight line relative to Ferrari and Red Bull, say. But the field was fairly split. There were some cars on the lighter end, some cars on the heavier end. For example, Aston Martin, I think, were similar or slightly slower than where we were in terms of straight line. And obviously the more rear wing you put on the car, the more drag that comes with it, the more downforce as well, but the slower you go in a straight line. Prior to every single event, we do a whole sweep of simulations to understand where our car, our aerodynamic package, is optimum. Sometimes that's using a driver in what we call the DIL, the driver in loop simulator, so physically sat there and driving laps. Sometimes it's a model driver that does thousands and thousands of laps and will sweep through every single setup item near enough that we have available to us. And on that, you'll end up with an optimum range for your car, for your aerodynamic package, for the conditions that you're going to experience at the track. And for our car, we knew that that higher downforce wing, the one that is slow in a straight line, should pay dividends in order to be able to do, for example, a one-stop in the race. It will help protect the tyres a little bit more, but potentially at the cost of straight line speed, as you saw, the ability to overtake, even the ability to defend. But if your tyres are in a good condition in Abu Dhabi, and there was quite a bit of degradation this year, that can pay dividends. And so that's the reason why we went with a higher downforce rear wing. Why was Lewis on a one-stop rather than a two-stop strategy? Our goal in Abu Dhabi was to do everything we could to really finish second in the Constructors' Championship. And to do that, you have to finish in front of Ferrari. Easier said than done when you're qualifying behind them, and when truthfully in the race our car pace wasn't there. But we saw with Lewis that his degradation was actually very good on stint 2 of the race, when we switched that hard tyre. Obviously stint 1 wasn't. What happened there is actually we had graining, so it's where the aspect of the tyre is damaged and you lose a significant amount of performance from that. And that happened actually both on the front and on the rear axle. That cost him a tremendous amount of time, and you saw that. He went backwards. Initially it looked like we could bring the fight to Ferrari, and then he fell backwards very quickly. And what it also did is we brought the stop forward near enough for that second stint. But on that second stint, the degradation with Lewis was low, as it was for a few other cars up and down the grid. It wasn't the same for all cars. There was a few cars with higher degradation. And in Lewis's case, the one stop meant that he would gain track position over Sainz and George. But for us, really, getting one car ahead of the Ferrari, one of our best opportunities, or our only opportunity, was to go for that one stop. On the 2, Lewis would have been ahead of George, but behind Sainz, similar tyres, similar age, similar car pace, and nothing really could have happened. But the reason why we split is you can gain from safety cars. So all of that stint of the race where Lewis was ahead, had a safety car come out, we would have benefited from it, because we would have stopped and taken the track position gain that came with it. So ultimately, splitting your cars creates opportunity. Just in this particular circumstance, unfortunately, it didn't transpire that anything happened. Sum up this season in 4 words. I'm about to use 20 to explain why this is difficult, but I probably should have read this question before I read it out on camera. It's difficult, character building, challenging, so that's 3 of them, and my 4th word would be teamwork. So sort of putting, I guess, a bit of explanation, even though it wasn't part of the question behind it, it's been a difficult year. We're a team that's used to success, used to winning, used to being at the front, and we weren't. And that really has changed the organisation, but for the positive. We're much better as a result of this, and that's the characters that have built, and we have built ourselves as a result of that. It's been challenging, there's no question about it. We're not in the position we're used to being in, and you have to make sure that as a result of that, you adapt to move forward. And we have. I think we proved, compared to the beginning of the season, relative to the end, how much we move forward. But it's probably the last word that's the most important for me, the teamwork. This team had to pull closer together than really ever before. It's very easy in these circumstances, in these difficult times, to pull apart, and we didn't. The drivers pulled together, and I'm confident we have the best driver lineup on the grid. We have 2 incredible drivers pushing each other, but working as a team to make the car better. We have a team both in Brixworth and in Brackley and at the track as well, all working together with just one goal in mind, and that's not to win anymore necessarily, it's to make sure we understand the package we have so that we're back to our winning ways next year. Do you guys understand everything to do with the W13 and therefore the W14 and are confident across the winter going into next year? I don't think you can truly now or even across the winter state that we know everything about the W13. We clearly across the year, every time we learned something, discovered a whole series of new items that really we had to learn, understand and develop very quickly. But if you compare where we were, not so much in Bahrain. Bahrain, we were actually fairly competitive after testing there, but I would definitely say Melbourne, Imola, that first little sequence of the year, are tracks that are normal tracks, for want of a better word, and then compare where we were after the Austin update, the final update of the year that we bought it, so that's Austin, Mexico, Brazil and Abu Dhabi. Yeah, there's some ups and downs, very much so, and that's a part of what I meant by this car has items that we believe we understand and some of them that's still not fully explained as a result of that. But if you look at the direction moving forward, the gaps to the front, especially on race pace, we made huge amounts of progress. And you only do that by understanding where your problems are, working on them and working as a team. Is it enough to win next year, which is really where that question goes? The confidence we have is that we now have our tools, our wind tunnel tools, our development tools, our performance tools here in the organisation, producing performance which is more than our competitors. It's allowing us to move further forward relative to them. There's still a void though, and Abu Dhabi really showed that. That has to be caught up across the winter, and I think we have a very good process and system in place to do that. That development that you saw across the season will continue across the winter. and I think we'll be in a very strong place next year. So we had a message through that said, I just want to say thanks for your efforts this season, team. And I just really wanted to say that from us speaking on behalf of the team, your messages of positivity, your support throughout the season make a tremendous amount of difference to us. They really do lift us from the dark times that we're sometimes in, and then also help us even in the Brazil moments where you're sharing that experience together. We will be back. And next year, I'm confident, will be stronger than this year for all of us. Thank you for all of your questions, not just this week, but throughout the year. We really, really appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.